with us on Monday. Kings close out 2024 with a win, begin 2025 with a 15-0 run to close it out and beat the Philadelphia 76ers. That's 2 in a row. How about that? After losing 6 straight, Coach Brown being dismissed, Doug Christie stepping in as interim head coach, and lots of things going on regarding the Sacramento Kings. It is Thursday at 8. That means our chance to check in Sam Amick from The Athletic, brought to you by our friends at Jiffy Lube. Sam, Happy New Year and good morning.
Happy New Year, Jay. Good morning, my friend. Long time no see.
Yes, we were both late night last night. I know it's part of your deal, but you're good. You're rested. You're ready for a good 20.
We are good. We are good. The rested part is questionable, but we're good to go.
Well, we're glad to have you on. You give such amazing intel to Dave and I every week, and to a ton of your subscribers and people that read your amazing stuff. You have a fresh, and it's not the presses anymore. How would you describe it? Off the digital internet? I don't know.
I'm old school, man. Let's just pretend there's still like a big old printing press, and and folks kind of working the levers. I'm good with that.
Speaking of that, did you ever write a story? And I don't think you did, but did you ever write a story on a typewriter?
No. Wow. What a question.
If we're going old school, we've all been around computers, but I'm trying to think, was there an early days Sam Amick going?
The closest there was to that, the B used to have what were called Coyote computers, and they were very basic, like almost MS-DOS type systems. They were computers, but they were about as bare bones as you get. But no typewriters. I was beyond that generation.
Okay, good. Well, you do have a fresh off the presses piece at The Athletic about the Kings, really, and De'Aaron Fox and his future. And I kind of want to go back in order, because I remember last Thursday talking to you. The Kings did have that awful loss to Detroit, and or maybe they had not had that yet. I don't know. Timetable's all a blur here, Sam. But they were in a bad way. They had a bunch of losing a streak going, a bunch of losses in a row, I should say. And I'd asked you, is Monty's seat hot? Is Mike Brown's seat hot? And at the time, kind of your reference was, look, there's not a lot of talk about replacements. That's kind of where this starts. And then, boom, not long, the next day, Mike Brown dismissed. So I guess I want to backtrack to start there. That decision, I guess by now we've lived it, but did that surprise you?
Yeah, why the heck would anybody believe anything I say after that? Yeah, it was that morning. If I have the timing right, we talked Thursday morning. They lose to Detroit Thursday night. It was ugly. Obviously, Fox had a bad finish. Mike Brown is really candid after the game. The rest is history. You know that story. Yeah, it did surprise me. Even Friday morning, I was actually like Vivek Ranadive. I was also out of town, and I was on the phone. Because of how bad that loss was, I checked in with a few people that morning to basically say, is there any chance that something happens here? And both inside the organization and people tied to it from out early on that day didn't have a whiff of it. Now the ones in the organization, obviously, we're not the ones making the decision. So I was surprised by it. Now you obviously start learning more about what went down and how much angst there was, and here we are. But I was pretty shocked.
Yeah, and I think immediately when it happens, all it can lead to is speculation. Who did this? Why did it happen? And I know something you've brought up, I've been critical of it too, was, look, these decisions can be made. They will be made. They'll continue to be made across organizations in this league. But I'm a little stunned and surprised and probably bothered that either Vivek and or Monty hasn't been in front of you, me, whoever out there to kind of explain their thought process of this.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's funny because admittedly, this is the human component of our jobs. I wake up on a day like today, and I publish a column like the one I published, which is essentially saying De'Aaron Fox didn't do this, and somebody besides De'Aaron Fox needs to say that. Now, when I published it, I'm thinking that I'm sure the Kings or some of the fans are going to be like, all right, we just won 2 in a row. Why you got to be Debbie Downer? But the bigger picture here is much more important, in my opinion. And the lack of transparency that you are hitting on, I think, is not only an issue. I mean, it's their prerogative, but to me, as somebody who, a big part of my job is to kind of read the room and assess the way people move, it's pretty revealing. Like, you don't, when you feel, um, what's the word I'm looking for? When you feel firm in the decision that you made, and you know why you made it, then you're not afraid to stand in front of the world and talk about it. Um, the Kings, and I'm just going to focus on Vivek. He runs the team. He's got an incredible amount of influence, and honestly, I think a fairly unhealthy way of impacting people who work for him, because of the culture that, unfortunately for the fans, has not, you know, gotten as to a healthier place. It has gone up in recent years, and now we are seeing that some of those old habits die hard. But not being willing to talk to the world about why you fired the coach, to me, is pretty revealing. It shows that it's an uncomfortable topic. It's one that probably involves things that they don't want to share, and it's just not what healthy organizations do.
And there's been multiple people that have written about this. I think you maybe as well. Like there were quotes like they didn't want to do this, but they did do it. And so that's where it's kind of like, yeah, like to your point, like if you stand firm, you believe in what you said, whether people agree or disagree, then you go out there and explain, and then you're on to the next. But it's been a little curious in that front of it. And Sam, have you had a chance at all to, or that of others have heard Mike Brown's side of this at all?
I How do I answer that? Like, not in any official capacity.
Mhm.
I mean, listen, I have a good sense of the perspective on that side. I reported in the column today that, in terms of things that I think are worth highlighting, that if the fired coach himself, and this is my understanding and my information, believes that Vivek was the driving force behind the decision, and certainly not De'Aaron. Mike and De'Aaron still have a good relationship.
Mhm.
And this is Chris Haynes mentioned this the other day on a podcast, and he's spot on. A couple months ago, going into the year, to give you an idea about whether or not they were on the same page, Mike had gone to De'Aaron and his wife for say, and actually told them going into the season, like, hey, I'm going to really ramp it up here in terms of being tough on you, not only in practice and things like that, but occasionally in public. And his idea was, it was very Spursian, and to some degree Warriors-ish. Steph Curry, Tim Duncan, players like that are coachable. You can be hard on them, and then when they accept it, then the rest of the players fall in line. That's the idea, and that's the type of thing that Mike had learned over the years. So, as De'Aaron has said publicly in that interview with ESPN, he liked hard coaching. He went to Kentucky because John Calipari was going to be that guy. So, trying to clear up some of the smoke around De'Aaron that I thought was unfair, and again, more spinning it forward. The reason that matters for the Kings' purposes is that, from a common sense standpoint, if people thought De'Aaron wanted Mike out of town, then it would stand to reason that De'Aaron would be less interested in leaving town now
Mhm.
than he was before, and that is not the case, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, it seems like on that front, it took things, even further down that road.
Well, yeah, let's go there then. That's part of the gist of your article today. Like you said on The Athletic, you can check out Sam's amazing work there about, yeah, De'Aaron, no influence in this at all, with the exception of being a player on a roster that, was losing, what, 6 in a row. But yeah, no direct impact on that. But how does this impact De'Aaron and his future? Obviously, he bet on himself to get that big contract. And what do you think the outlook looks like right now, Sam, for De'Aaron's future? Because apparently there's quite a few teams interested in him.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you can always tell how real a star player situation is by how the other teams are moving, and other teams are getting intel, one way or another, that he, that there is an element of, like, open for business to at least discuss possibilities, kind of behind the scenes. Now, the Kings are not taking any phone calls on De'Aaron. They're shutting those types of things down. They're trying to improve the team right now. But to me, the distinction here is that it went from being a situation where it's De'Aaron's prerogative to consider maybe heading elsewhere. And to remind people, he's got 1 year left on his contract, turned down multiple extension offers. If he doesn't take, as expected, if he doesn't take the extension this summer, if he's still here, then, the Kings would be under a lot of pressure to move him so they don't lose him for nothing. So that's the backdrop. But to me, Jay, it went from being a situation where you could understand his frustrations, one playoff berth in 7 seasons, all those things that he's within his own kind of reason to feel. But now, because of all this dysfunction and the messiness and the way that they fired Mike Brown and the narrative around the team and the fact that the optics are as bad as they are again for the organization, it just made it easier for him, I think, to be a bit of a sympathetic figure here, because around the league and even among the fans, I think even a lot of Kings fans, it's easier to see where when you're 27 years old and you're looking at the runway and thinking to yourself, how much more of my prime do I have, that it shouldn't shock anybody that he's having second thoughts about kind of partnering with a group that functions like they have in the past week. It's just, that to me is the part where it's an unforced error, if you will.
This is me asking you to, do your best guess or predicting what's more likely to happen on that front. De'Aaron, for lack of a better term, saying, I'm just not going to return, or demanding a trade, or the fact that kind of the Kings out of necessity go, you know what, maybe this isn't a path we wanted to go down, but Team X is offering this and we just can't say no.
I guess probably the latter, based on, well, to me, they bleed together. I think
Okay.
they bleed together. The thing is with De'Aaron, and this should be said too, everybody I've talked to says he continues to be a professional. Had a great night last night. Obviously, I mean, his numbers are bonkers. I looked at it last night: 25, 6, 5, and 1.7 steals per game. The only other players doing that are Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So from that standpoint, he's having a fantastic season. You can't really question his professionalism at all on that front. Personality wise, he's such an interesting guy because he tends to, for sure, be very opinionated at times, but he's not the type to, I don't think, to want this to be messy. He cares about the city, cares about the Kings fans. I had somebody with the organization recently describe him as a gentleman, which was to kind of portray that he's not trying to make this messy. But the facts are the facts. It goes back to the fact that if the Kings, the major if they can't turn it around in a major way over the course of the next few months and generate enough optimism and excitement that he might change his mind, which to me seemed very unlikely, but stranger things have happened, then the Kings are just going to have to do the prudent thing, which is to look at the landscape and figure out what path is best for them. Because like if he makes it clear, and right now all signs point this way, that he has no intention of signing that extension, then the clock is ticking in terms of what you can get for him in return. I mean, you talk to people right now who say, and people have different opinions, but who say that it behooves them to get ahead of this right now, because the more the pressure rises, the more that other teams believe that they're in a pinch and know that they're in a pinch, then the price goes down and you get less in return when you finally make that move. But that's the tough road ahead that they're facing.
So just hearing that, I mean, that sounds more like, I mean, the trade deadline's what, 5 weeks away? Is this more of a, if it's a, is this an off season thing then, still with that year to go after that?
I mean, some teams think that's the case. I think it's been volatile enough that I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, if they, I'm just spitballing here, if they drop 3-4 in a row and it was looking hopeless again, I mean, these last 2 games are good, but let's also not kid ourselves. They beat Dallas without 3 stars, and last night there was no Joel Embiid. So I tend to think, this is just me talking, that like it's just easier for everybody involved to do it in the summertime. Not only the Kings getting a chance to see what this team can do, it's pretty uncomfortable to raise your hand mid-season and say, I want to go. And that doesn't mean it won't happen, but that makes the player the bad guy most of the time. And it's very public, as opposed to, at least in the summer, when stuff like this goes down, you're reading about it in the media, but you're not physically seeing these people in the arena. On top of that, Jay, the teams that have interest in him, like, let's look at San Antonio, for example, and there's a lot of noise about them really looking hard at this, and De'Aaron potentially having an interest there. Um, they're trying to see what Victor Wembanyama can do with Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes right now. They've got some momentum. I haven't connected with them on this question, but I can't imagine that they're, excited about the prospect of having to get all their ducks in a row in the next 5 weeks in order to get a player like De'Aaron. To me, it's the transition would be easier in the summertime, and that goes for, I think, most of the teams. But it's pro sports, so who knows what happens.
Yeah, and this is also fluid, right? I mean, like you said, if things turn around in a substantial way, certainly that'd be exciting, but you also can't get carried away with the 2 wins that they just had. But kind of the optics of the move that they made and dismissing Mike Brown. One of my thoughts, Sam, was that teams make those moves, and so a lot of times it's with handful of games to go, 15 to go, and you're just like, let's just finish out the year, let's kind of see what we've got and reboot and start fresh. To me, my feeling was this organization has always felt they've got enough and they should be winning more than they are. And you make this move to try to still salvage this year. So kind of with that as a backdrop, would there be more additional pressure on the front office to add to De'Aaron instead, or add to this roster to, one, try to improve the record, and two, to maybe entice De'Aaron to, even though he hasn't expressed an interest to leave, but to try to entice him to stay?
Yeah, they want to add for sure. In fact, I'm a little confused by, even internally, there's just mixed messaging. This kind of goes back to the culture question, is like, you can't have some people, I mean, yes, you're going to have different opinions, but some people acting like this roster is ready made and good to go, and that the coach was the problem, and then others who are in positions of power admitting, like, no, we need to make some moves. We have some holes, back up 5, 2, 3, 4, like, they're looking. Um, that is where there's a lot of nuance with this situation, because I do think, to the front office's credit, you mentioned that ESPN story and the quote about nobody wanted to fire Mike.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just being honest with you. That is 100% the spirit that I've gotten from that side. And with that in mind, there is an acknowledgement that they need to get better. And so I wrote about Cam Johnson in this piece, and the fact that, Brooklyn and the Kings have had pretty extensive talks on that front. I think, the Nets asking price is still too rich for the Kings' blood. And as we get closer to the deadline, maybe that changes, but he does appear to be somewhat of a priority for them. And they're hoping that Brooklyn changes its stance. There's a bunch of other names we wrote last week, but yeah, they know that that this roster is flawed. The DeMar DeRozan move has not been as seamless as they would had hoped for, and they're looking for solutions.
It's interesting. Some of talking about the mixed messaging, or just hearing different things from different people within the organization on your work here. I I guess, Sam, an opinion question here: how damaging is it to this team's success or other teams? I don't know if other organizations are always 100% in step, but it just seems like right now a lot of this seems cloudy and murky from a lot of different angles.
Yeah, it's honestly, Jay, it's like a TV show, and it's not the type that you want to see as a fan. I mean, and I say this, I've written a bunch of positive stuff about them during their ascension the past couple of years, and I've always joked that, like, my life's easier if like the mood in that building is good. I go there for work on a very consistent basis. But it's, you have a blame game that's happening. You have all kinds of stuff floating around in terms of reasons that it happened, that, some of it you can substantiate, some you can't. But there's more stories flying around than you typically find in a coaching change. And a lot of the stuff, honestly, has very little to do with basketball at times. I mean, it's personality stuff, it's power struggles. So yeah, it's not, I mean, that's where you go back to the press conference thing. And the Kings and a lot of other teams hate it when us in the media do this, but, like, the Warriors are absolutely elite when it comes to messaging, and when it comes to media, and when it comes to PR. And Draymond Green punched out Jordan Poole, which is about as negative a headline as you could have that's basketball related anyway. And, Steve Kerr, Bob Myers were front and center without too much time. Then you had Draymond Green all doing press conferences to take this thing head on. Jordan Poole's the only one who didn't speak. Can't really blame him. He got knocked out. Like, they wanted to discuss what happened, help the fans understand how they were going to handle it going forward. And at minimum, you had a level of transparency and accountability that you could sit in that truth, if that makes sense. And that's what's missing from this type of situation. You've got some really, really good people within this Kings organization, and they have to talk in the shadows and behind the scenes to try to get certain messages out, but there's not the synergy that you need to take something like this head on.
Was there to your knowledge, any pushback, internal debate on going with Doug Christie? I totally get it. Fan favorite. I'm a huge fan of Doug, but Jay Triano had coached in this league. Luke Laux is a up and comer. Any word or any pushback on kind of the pecking order of how they did things there?
I mean, it's certainly in coaching circles, that's a big time question. I don't know. I can't answer that with a ton of specificity, other than it does feel like there is a vibe, if you will, with the coaches who are more closely aligned with Mike Brown than somebody like Doug, who has a longer history that is more King centric with the organization. You and I both know, we weren't surprised at all when it was Doug, because this has been an idea that they've had for a while, going back to Alvin Gentry taking over for Luke Walton. Doug was in the running at that time. He's a fan favorite. He's an organizational favorite, and one that, my understanding is that Vivek, even before the Mike Brown firing, was trying to find ways to elevate Doug's role, that he is a Doug fan. So, but yeah, Jay's a former head coach, former national team coach, for the Canadian team, and a guy with a ton of respect. And he's got every right to feel like he got leapfrogged here. And to his credit, seems like all of the entire staff continues to try to help Doug and help the team and do their thing and move forward. But yeah, I mean, that's counterintuitive in terms of resume to go the way they went.
I think you said it perfectly, Sam. This is a TV show, and it's ups and downs and dramas and twists and turns. And, 2 wins, 2-1 under Doug Christie, 2 wins that they basically had to get. Just your read on where the team is. It's constantly changing. 15-19, still a pretty significant deficit to climb out of, with a probably much more difficult schedule ahead of them. I don't know, just on the court, what do you look at the next 2 or 3 weeks with this roster that they have? How do you envision that going for this team?
I mean, honestly, I think you got 2 layers here. All right, on the De'Aaron discussion, that's bleak because, and I'm answering your question, but because, his hopes and dreams are title contention. Well, all right, they are a very long ways away from that. So that's one discussion. Let's compartmentalize that for a second. If you talk about just having something for the fans to root for this season, they are a 5, 6, 7 game winning streak away from being right back in it. I think they're 2 games away from Golden State in the 10th spot right now. I will say, last night, when they win, they have a fantastic finish, 13-0 down the stretch, 15, whatever it was. Good commentary from, I saw Sabonis's comment about Doug Christie telling the team, let's get 3 stops. They play very good defense down the stretch. They go up to the top of the building after the game and have that team meeting by the beam. That energy, if you can keep that going and win some games and get back in this thing, then they're going to be right there with the rest of the middle of the West, where there's so much parity and so much opportunity, honestly, to make up for a bad start like the one they've had. So if they can capture, what they had late in that past game, I mean, that energy was fantastic. The fans are going nuts. That's what they should be hoping for. And Doug is, to his credit, one of the reasons that they wanted him in that position was his positivity and his spirit and the way that he approaches the job. And obviously there were some who felt like Mike Brown's commentary on the team had become, too consistently, cutting and tough with his commentary. So there's a little contrast, and we'll see if Doug can can push it in the right direction. But it's going to be an uphill climb.
Yeah, for sure. Now 15-19 after that 15-0 run that you mentioned to win yesterday over Philly. Sam's article in The Athletic titled De'Aaron Fox Shouldn't Bear the Blame for Kings Firing Mike Brown. Really good intel there. Check it out at The Athletic and your continued coverage of this story and all the stuff you do for The Athletic. Sam, thank you so much. Happy New Year to you. We look forward to talking to you next Thursday.
Happy New Year, buddy. Talk soon.
All right, thanks. That's Sam Amick. Again, Sam is all over this. Anthony Slater, a lot of people have been covering this, and I think you could just hear it in some of the things that Sam was mentioning, that some of the mixed messages maybe internally, the lack of transparency, but all that has happened. It's still there. It still helps lead to these questions. Maybe De'Aaron's future, I think, is a big talking point, but the games go on, and you just got to try to keep winning even with all this noise that is around this team right now, and there's quite a bit of it. We'll talk more about that coming up at 9 with Katie Christensen. Still more to get to,